Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our summer session this afternoon. We are joined by Charlotte Watson, who will be covering her session on the pedagogy of group tuition, how to manage engagement and learning. Over to you, Charlotte.
Hiya, I'm checking my microphone. Is that better, Rowena? You're saying it's muffled. I've just checked the microphone. Oh, good, that's better.
Yeah. It was a little bit like mumbling.
I think it was on the wrong setting, so thank you for that.
Oh, okay.
Lovely to see some names that I know, and always lovely to see new people I've never met before. If you come to the conference in October, please do come up to me and say hello. And it's always lovely to meet new tutors and people passionate about education. So we'll get going today. I'm not going to say too much about myself because I never do, because basically it is on LinkedIn, it's on Facebook. You can find all sorts of information about me. But what I tend to do is talk about my experience as we go through, and then you get to kind of hear about who I am and what I do anyway. But it's very kind to have been invited to speak today, and I appreciate the opportunity just to share really what is my own experience. I am not a pedagogy scholar or a PhD, but my experience has come through the many years of teaching I did, and through the group tuition I do, through all the studies I did, and through the CPD I did, and how I put that in place. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today. And I just have to keep checking where my other screen is. You'll have to forgive me because it's a little bit, there we go. So I'm going to that one. So obviously, managing engagement and learning in basically about 45 minutes, you're going to get a tiny snapshot. I am literally going to answer some of the basic questions that I get asked all the time. I have actually created a self-paced course along with Samantha McMahon on groups, how to fill them, how to market them, how to manage them, what to do in them, and so on and so forth. So if you like, some of the ideas I'm sharing now are bits and pieces of tasters of what's in our course. But obviously, many of your questions, to be honest, if I can't answer them now, I would direct you towards the course that Samantha and I have actually created. And we do have a free webinar coming this Friday at 1 o'clock on what is in our course, and a few tasters of that as well. So everything I'm doing links and works well together. But anyway, let's get on with today. If you want to know more about that, you can basically find information on my LinkedIn or Facebook page and how to register for that free webinar on Friday if you'd like. But let's start with where we're at now. Now, some of you may never have hosted a group lesson or course in your life. You might be feeling incredibly fearful. You might be thinking, this is something I can't do, but I'm really interested in trying. You might be at the other end. You might be at 10 and go, yes, I'm fearless. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for years. I've been a teacher forever, and I'm able and have been doing groups for a long time now. Personally, I'll tell you where I am, and there's no judgment either way. There's no judgment with you being a 1 or a 10. I tend to hover around the 8 and 9 mark. Because I suppose I'm someone who's always trying to challenge myself. So I never let myself get to a point where I feel so comfortable that I'm just going to replicate that forever and a day. So, you know, I'm looking at new platforms, for instance, like Pencil Spaces, and I'm looking at other platforms in terms of whiteboards as well. And looking at different ways to do things all the time. So I never really stay, if ever I am at 10, I never really stay at 10 for very long, because I always think, I know there's more I could be doing. There's things I could be improving on. But just have a think. Well, how do you feel right now? How do you feel about tuition, group tuition, or in terms of your experience? And just write in chat if you feel comfortable to. Tell me where you're at in terms of group tuition, if you feel comfortable in doing so. What kind of number do you feel you're around? If you don't want to share, that's absolutely fine. You can just keep that number for yourself, because hopefully, even before the end of the lesson, I would like to hope we could shift you maybe 1 point on a little bit, even if, you know, we don't practice things, we don't necessarily experience things. Maybe some of the ideas or the things I talked to you about, you realize, yes, I already do that. Yes, actually, I'm doing the right things. Or you think, actually, that's a good idea. I'm going to try that. Well, good for you, Claire, for trying. And I'm really happy that you're not going to give up, because like my students, you know, that word fail doesn't exist. It's just a mnemonic for first attempt in learning, as we say. And every time you try something, even if it doesn't work, it's an opportunity to grow and it's an opportunity to learn. So, you know, just keep at it. And hopefully some of the training that I'm offering today and in the future will help as well. Want to be better, done group tuition around an 8. Oh, good one. That whole word, the difference between tuition and teaching, we could talk about for hours. Okay, that is a whole webinar in itself. I personally would say most of the time I teach, but because of the extras I give in terms of how I support parents and students, and sometimes how I do pivot in terms of going with the needs of the children, that is where it becomes tuition as well. But that's an interesting one we could talk about another time, or could try and investigate if we've got time. I have a caveat. I need to leave by about 5 to 1 because I've actually got 25 kids waiting for me at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So, sorry, 5 to 2 I've got to leave. So I'm right in the middle of my 11 plus tutoring. But, you know, let's come back to this at the end and let's see if we're somewhere different at the end. So the questions I'm going to deal with today, I'm actually not going to deal with the different types of group tuition, because that in itself is a whole little model. And in fact, again, that's something that's in my course. So whether you literally have a group and you teach them at the front and they do work and you teach them a bit more and you do a bit more, whether it's face-to-face, online, or whether perhaps you have groups of different year groups and each child is doing something different, I'm not necessarily going to cover that today, but there are opportunities for that to be covered in other courses or other sessions. But these are the 4 questions that I get time and time again. Okay. How do you keep their attention? How can they share work, ideas, and answer questions? How do you monitor progress and assess? How do you make sure they get personalized support? And that, I suppose, is where a little bit more of the tuition comes in. I mean, I'm very clear. So, for instance, I literally had somebody yesterday who was interested in my group tuition from September. And he said, but you have 16 in your group. And I said, yes. And I said, if you want something that's completely personalized and you want something because your child has specific needs that only those need addressing, this is not for you. So I was really clear to that parent. This is about general preparation for the 11 plus to make sure we cover everything. Yes, I do make sure I track every child's progress. Yes, I do make sure every child is engaged. But if you want something that's purely kind of, if you like, a boutique lesson for your child, this is not for you. So I think it's very important to realize we cannot do everything in group tuition. I am not, well, put it this way, in the way that I deliver it. And I make that really clear when I market who is my tuition for and basically who it isn't for. There are times as well where if I feel a child is doing particularly well in group tuition, but there's just one little thing I think that they are not able to work on, I'll either give them extra support through extra work or some self-paced videos they can watch. Sometimes I'll offer a one-to-one as extra just to troubleshoot. So I think you can also see that with group tuition, depending on how many children you have, there are little alternatives and options and extras you can add into that if you're feeling that one child is doing particularly okay, but they just need that extra bit of attention. Okay, so any other questions at this moment that you think you really desperately want to try and answer today? And I'll see if I can weave it into the presentation. But this, of course, is about pedagogy and learning. So if it's about marketing, I'm not going to answer it. All right, hopefully those are the types of questions you were coming for. What I'm not going to do today is give you loads of references, books to read, quotes, lots of scientific research. There are people out there who offer that. If you want more of the really heavy stuff, then absolutely I can recommend Arthur Moore to you. He runs something called Navigated, and once every 3 or 4 months, he has a webinar and a magazine that comes out, which is really about pedagogical, you know, nitty gritty stuff, hard stuff to read and, you know, digest. And it's brilliant, but it also has practical applications. Andrea Gadsby is another person who's very much on the kind of academic side of things. And they're both doing a joint webinar actually at the October conference. So if you want that kind of nitty gritty, really hardcore stuff, do go and see them as well. And I'm really looking forward to that presentation. So anyway, let's get going. Now, all these pictures you might notice are actually of me in lessons, because what I want to say to you is everything I'm saying you can use are things I've tried and tested. And I've tested them both on face-to-face and online as well. I actually do 2/3 of my teaching online now rather than face-to-face. So obviously I know people often think that engagement can be easier face-to-face, but I actually really enjoy the engagement I get online. So here's the first one about attention. So here are some of the ideas that I have. Now, annoyingly, I really wanted this to be a little bit more practical and actually do some of these things with you, but I'm not familiar with whichever this is, Teams or whatever it is that we're using, and I just don't want it to go terribly wrong and then mess everything up, which I suppose I could do being a teacher, taking risks, but not today. I've made that tactical decision. But these are the kind of things, if say we had more time or it was what I'm used to, or we were face to face, I would go through these with you in more detail. But questioning. Now, as I said, Arthur Moore's done a whole webinar on questioning, but absolutely getting questions either face to face or online. But it's how you ask the questions that counts. So what I do, for instance, sometimes is I give and I'm erring towards online here because I know that online is probably where many people's sticking point is in terms of attention. But if you do want to just let me know if you're mainly online or face-to-face or both, that would be helpful so I can, again, steer the questions to you. But for instance, this morning, so I had 18 kids this morning and they all had a number. And every so often, I would literally just randomly say number 2. And I'd get them to answer the questions. Number 10, okay, number 11, number 1, number 3. Now, okay, often I use their names as well, but today, to keep them on board, I wanted them to use numbers so that they made sure they were really listening. These kids are kids I've known for a long time, so they are very willing and able to answer questions. But if I didn't know them very well, I might say, number 3, I'm going to come to you in a little while and I'm going to ask you this question. So I actually prepare them. And one thing as well around questioning is I very much have built a community of people and students who know that risk taking and getting things wrong is normal. So, you know, I tell them basically 2 phrases are banned. Now, obviously, there's always going to be exceptions to this. So I don't want you to think some poor kid is going to be absolutely having apoplexy because they can't say these phrases. But 2 phrases, you know, basically we don't do is, I don't know, I'm not too sure. Okay. Or I'm not too sure, but, and then answer. I say to them, I don't mind, because if you get this wrong, this is an opportunity for all of us. And so they can never get away with, I don't know, because I'll say to them, where's the evidence? What have you tried? So it's really developing that kind of community as well. Now, when I'm talking about asking for responses in this picture, for instance, I'm an English teacher, so I know this might be different in maths or science, but I've got a response from them. We were literally talking about, we were doing some pre-writing skills, and we were talking about walking into the shower, opening the curtain and seeing a massive, great big fat spider. And I went, 1, 2, 3, show me your reaction. And that's what they did. Okay, so it's looking for responses in different ways. Giving you the 1 to 10 at the beginning is a great way to get responses from kids. How are you feeling right now? What's your confidence level? And just getting them to privately, I even get them face to face to get them to close their eyes, and they just do that. We're not talking, you know, high-tech stuff, but online, obviously, you can use chat. So it's finding ways to get responses from them, either prepared or unprepared. Okay, it could be an emoji. We've got all these different emojis here. So it's not necessarily always, you know, doing a maths problem and getting them to hold it up. Now, funnily enough, I was talking to Samantha the other day because we were talking about high tech and low tech. And no, it wasn't Samantha, it was Tracy Landsberg, if you know her. Now, Tracy Landsberg is a guru of science online teaching. If you don't know her, link with her, follow her, she's amazing. Even with all her high tech, she still sends every student a little mini whiteboard and a pen. And during the lesson, when they're doing calculations, she'll just get them to hold them up. Okay, there is no reason why you can't send a little mini whiteboard like we all used to do in class through the post, if you're maybe more if you're primary. Again, no reason why you can't do that. Obviously, there are also resources, so things like some of your whiteboards that you use. I know Class Kick, for instance, which Elaine McKechnie uses. You can set up a little working area for every single child while you're working, and you can set them the same task or different tasks, and they can be working on that separately, and you can see their screen. So in terms of, you know, responses and getting them to work and give you responses, yes, Class Kick. Okay, I don't know what the limit is, but that is a way in which if you need to see things going on and you want to see it on your screen all at the same time, they have a system where each student can be working on something separately and you can see it all across your screen. Okay, now pace and focus is really, thank you, Claire, is really important as well. So when I'm working with younger students, so for instance, I'm doing a 3-hour, I've done one this morning and I do a 3-hour session this afternoon in for 4 days for 2 weeks for the 11 plus. There is no way we can drag that out with like one long, you know, thing to concentrate on. So although we only looked at 2 things today, we looked at skimming and scanning and we looked at words within context. I had loads of different activities for them. You know, we kept chopping and changing, we kept switching. Now, I do offer that all in a booklet. So unlike many people, I do offer them a booklet which is curated by me. Some of it is licensed material, some of it's material I send myself, but that goes to them digitally, and they can either print it off or they can work on it from their screen. Okay. And what I find about having something in front of them is it keeps them focused because they know I'm going to be coming back to them. I'll say something like, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do these 2 questions and then we're going to discuss them. Okay. So it's constantly thinking, even if you want to concentrate on the same thing for a whole lesson, how can you break it up into steps? How many different activities or ideas do you think you need? Or, you know, little video clips to look at so that it keeps their attention and they know there's always going to be something else coming. Okay. Now, there are times, so on Thursday, I'm doing a whole mock test with them, which is 50 minutes. So that is something we are going to do online. So I'm not saying every single thing all the time has to be like that, but I would say really manage your pace and focus either within one session or throughout, say, a series of sessions. So you're making sure that throughout a series of sessions, there is, yes, some, you know, maybe independent time, but there is also time when you are chopping and changing and looking at different things. The other thing I'd say is really important is collaboration. So, you know, I'll often get in chat, when are we doing our next breakout room? And I'll tell you, that is all the way from year 3 to year 11. My year 11s love it because they say they learn from other people. They get a different perspective. They get different ideas. Of course, my 3s and 4s love it because it's, you know, a bit of a kind of a fun thing to do for them. And they feel trusted. Now, I know, obviously, there are some safeguarding things to do with that. We do a lot of training on it with the young ones. They have to sign an e-safety policy, and the parents, so that they know if at any point their behavior is inappropriate, they basically are breaking my T's and C's and could be asked to leave. I do record my sessions as well, just so you know. But there's lots of room. There's lots of ways in which you can collaborate. What I used to love as well was Jamboard. I'm so gutted that that has gone, because on Jamboard, it was a whiteboard and they'd have like little mini kind of post-it notes and different things that students could grab hold of and, you know, manipulate. So I'm just in the process of, you know, looking at other ways to have things where they can, you know, physically collaborate all together. So I know. So has anyone else, just as we're talking now, does anyone else use something similar to Jamboard that they'd like to share now, which kind of gives that opportunity for children to all together be able to manipulate, and you can see straight away any feedback or ideas that they have? Is anyone using anything else? I mean, obviously, a lot of people use bit paper, but I know a lot of people use bit paper mainly for one-to-one. But I do a blank PowerPoint slide. Oh, that's lovely. You see, that's a great idea. And they can just annotate the screen. Are you suggesting they use their mouse, or are you suggesting they use a graphics tablet? Yeah, I've heard a lot of complaints about bit paper. It is a good idea, isn't it? Okay, so yeah, it's much better if they can all get a graphics tablet. So I normally suggest Wacom because it's cheap and easy, particularly useful for older kids, of course. Yeah, pencil spaces have stuff, and they have individually assigned boards too. So there are a lot of options out there. What I actually do, I'll be honest with you, is I use a Remarkable tablet. And so whatever I've given the children, I then have on my tablet, which gets mirrored on the screen, and I annotate mine, and then they also literally just show me their work. But I am looking into ways in which they can mirror their screen. I can get in many ways. I can just give them, if they were writing on a tablet themselves, they could just be given permission to share their screen. So that's another thing I do. But yeah, any good ideas you want to share in here, please do, because I am not the master of all things collaborative and, you know, pedagogical and resource wise. So please do feel free. If you've got a good idea, then please feel free to share that as well. I will just take questions at this point in case anyone has got a question about what I've said so far. You can unmute, by the way, don't really have to write because that takes a little time. But I think how do you provide feedback? That's coming. I am coming up with that, so don't worry. But what I think you'll find is you'll realize I am literally not teaching you anything you don't know. If anything, this will probably, hopefully, just make you realize that what you're doing is great. Okay, Claire, so you can obviously, if you need to write your question, that's fine. You know, I am not coming up with anything that is new here. I am just finding the best ways to work with my students. You know, there's lots of online activities as well. Classwall is one of my favorite, which is very good, particularly for, I think it's called Classwall. Have I got that right? I haven't actually used it for a while because I tend to use it with my year 3s. If I've got that wrong, let me know. Wordwall, that's what it is. It's called Wordwall. That's an online kind of website where there's lots of games you can play, and there's like spin the wheel and things like that. But I don't do anything that I would say is groundbreaking. It's about knowing what is good pedagogy and using it. And I know that's what you're all doing. But, you know, even so, I hope maybe something will just maybe nudge you today to just feel that little bit more confident. So anyway, the next one, sharing work ideas and answering questions. Those of you who've worked in situations in either classrooms or in big groups, you know that feeling where everyone's going to shout out at once, or the same person's going to shout out at once, or the same people put their hands up, or nobody puts their hands up. Okay, that is our dread, isn't it? We're in a room, nobody answers questions. Okay, I will come to that, Claire, because that has happened to me, and I will explain how I dealt with it. If I forget, just nudge me back to that question. Sharing work. So you can see I've got some pictures here of ways in which students have shared their ideas in obviously in face-to-face situations. You can use a lot of post-it notes. I get through so many post-it notes. I try also to use little bits of whiteboard paper that can be wiped to kind of save the environment a little bit. You can actually get these long strips. They should be able to stick to walls as well. I used to use them, and then you can write on them as a whiteboard and wipe them off. So children can write on those. As I've said before, using one of the functions, one of the platforms like ClassKick, where every student can have their own area and literally can be working on things while you monitor all of them. Another thing I have done in the past, I've literally done this with Year 11s, when they're all working on a single question, say they're working on language paper 1, question 3, okay, which is on structure. Just had to remember for a second. It's on the structure of a text. Okay, I might literally split them all into their own individual breakout room, and then I will go around each breakout room and talk to them separately. If I was working with them face to face, I'd literally take them out of the workspace, talk to each one individually. They would go back. Things like strips, post-it notes, all that kind of thing. Group posters where they're working on something together, sharing ideas, modeling ideas. And again, I've done that in breakout rooms where literally I've got 3 people together. You're going to be working on this, generating ideas. One of you will talk on X, one of you on Y, one of you on Z. So it's very important though, when you do get them in groups, to make sure that it's really clear to them on what they're feeding back on. Okay, I did it yesterday. We were looking at a comprehension on turtles. They went into group, each one talked about a different paragraph. They got their presentation together. They came back into the whole group and fed back. Can you upload Google Docs? I don't know the answer to that. That would be something you'd have to find out. I presume so, if you are sharing a document. I use Chatbox all the time. I use Zoom. I have been trying forever and a day to, if you like, upgrade and use something snazzy. And I keep coming back to Zoom. And I want you to be confident. You do not have to be using the thing with the most whistles and bells. You really do not. I'd be interested to know how everyone does if you are online, how you do, which platform you do. So please feel free to put it in there. But all I want to say is I keep investigating other things. I keep trying other things. And I just keep coming back to Zoom because it's no nonsense. It's simple. What you've got to remember is you might be all whistles and bells, but in my experience of my students and their parents, they are not. So, you know, coming up with something amazing for them to log into and then find this bit and find that bit and do this and that, it's enough just to get them to remember where their Zoom link is. So I have now decided I'm going to stay comfortable with Zoom because it's what my parents know. They're comfortable with it. And I would only start to outsource something else one group at a time. So for instance, Yan Weng, I think her name is, has got something really fun for my Year 3s that I want to try. And I'm only going to do it with Year 3s to begin with. And then if I decide to go with another platform, I may just do one group at a time because You know, if it all goes wrong, you don't want to give yourself a headache. That's really good, Diane. You're using pencil spaces. It's something I keep erring towards, and I just haven't quite got there yet. But at the same time, you know, when I first came online and came into the online tutoring world, and I saw all these amazing, you know, videos people had done and this and that, and I freaked out massively because I basically got comparisonitis and basically crippled myself. You know, that's no good. You know, everyone's on their journey. We're all on a journey. Yes, obviously investigate, look at what people are doing, but don't get het up that your delivery is not as good as them because you're not using all these shiny things. Okay, remember, time and time again, people come back to me because it's me, and it's actually my personality. It's not whether I'm using ClassKick, Pencil Spaces, Zoom, Google this, you know, Microsoft that. They want me. They know I care for their child. They know I engage them. So yes, I'm trying to use other things to support me, to make it easier for me. But remember, it's about you as a person. Homework. This is contentious. I give homework, and the reason I give homework, and I'm very clear about how long it should take and how unstressed it should be, and so on and so forth, is because obviously, as a lot of my lessons are very interactive and there's a lot of information in there, how will I know how they perform independently unless I give them homework? And it's a fine line, isn't it? Because I do at most give about 10 to 15 minutes writing time, if you like, if ever I do give them an opportunity to do some independent work in class. But they're paying for me and my expertise. They're not paying for a child just to sit there. There are exceptions to that, if ever you want to hear about them. And I have very rigid and consistent and rigorous explanations for that and how I work that with my parents. But that is why I do provide homework, because I want to see what they're able to then deliver by themselves on their own. And I do a lot of work to support my parents and students to manage their homework. So it's not like, that's it, tough, you've got to do it or else. There's a lot behind the scenes I do to make sure homework is successful. But then you see, and this is a way I then get feedback as well. So what happens is they complete the work in the booklet. The booklet gets scanned back to me. I download it onto my remarkable tablet as a PDF. This is completely writable on. I write all over the homework. I give them feedback, and I send it back. And that is one of the main ways I do give homework. I do assess as well, because I'm working with 11 plus kids and also year 11s. So I do once a term assessments in class, and that's made very clear to the parents. But I do and that's when I do a longer, more rigorous assessment as well. So in a sense, that's where you're getting your money back, because although they're working in the lesson, I'm also making observations of them in the lesson. I am also then giving rigorous feedback to kind of justify why I'm doing it in class. I think I've more or less covered everything else there. Is there anyone? Yeah, lesson space. I didn't mention that as well. And there's also class in, which is another one. I know they've been at the TTA. But as I say, honestly, I find, and I know my colleague Samantha, she uses a Zoom whiteboard. I use my booklets. We work through those. I do show YouTube clips occasionally. We do play interactive games. But there's a lot of ways in which you can get around not panicking about all the high-tech stuff as well. I have a camera on policy, but obviously there are some times when people can't have their camera on. Sometimes if the connection's bad, but obviously I did have a child who had a lot of issues with social anxiety. So of course I left that off, and we would check before she went into a breakout room whether she felt comfortable in doing that or not. So obviously within the group, if there are specific needs that I feel, I mean, obviously we had a long meeting with this child before she started to check that we felt this was appropriate for her, but she really wanted to touch, she really wanted to try. So we did, and we found a way to make it work for her. But I do have a camera on policy, but there are many reasons why people might not. And there are justifiable reasons to have, you know, the camera off, particularly children with neurodivergent needs, etc. I set aside about, I try for the older kids, you'll laugh at this, but they really will only do about half an hour. So I try and only give them about half an hour for the older students. But for the younger ones doing 11 plus, it's at least an hour, if not two. But that's specifically for the 11 plus. It's a very different world. I certainly wouldn't do more than an hour in year 3, but it can go up to about 2 hours in year 5, depending on how many classes they come to. Thank you. I mean, how much time do you set aside for homework per week? What, to mark it? Oh, well, I teach 230 students a week, so I take about 3 hours a day to mark. But with the 11 pluses, I give them a lot of the answers themselves, because if it's a tick cross multiple choice comprehension, there is absolutely no need for me to mark that. It is an absolute waste of my time, because, you know, it's better for the parent to mark it, or the child to mark it if they're in year 5, look at their mistakes, look at where they went wrong. But what I do get the child to do is still send me in the marked work. And if they have any questions, they actually write on the paper, I don't understand why it's C and not D, please explain. So what it does is it cuts down unnecessary marking for me, where I'm literally going through tick cross when I don't need to. But where I do then see that there is a query, that's when I can then give personalized feedback to that child. I'm also developing explanatory videos for them as well, to go through the paper separately. So if they do want extra explanation, they can go through it with the video, because I'll be honest with you, there just isn't enough time in the class because of how much of the curriculum there is. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on. I can make this work. We're nearly at the end, I do believe. Yes. Yes, we've only got a couple of slides to go. And half of these I think I've actually answered. So here is a weird picture. It's basically my screen. Half of it has got a picture of something, of a game I was playing on Wordwall. And then here are the kids on the other side. And I actually can't remember what that was about. I think it was year 3 spotting. It was spotting parts of speech. And then they had to write in chat. They either wrote in chat, or I would have given them a number and said, right, number 3, it's your go, or number 2, it's your go. I do talk to them by their names, by the way. I do, but it's only for fast paced. Oh, sorry, my alarm's just gone off. But yes, monitoring progress. All of these in some shape or form. One of my main ways is through homework, because I do obviously receive homework every week. Sometimes we'll do a retrieval quiz at the beginning of a session. Have they remembered from last week? Sometimes we'll start with questioning from the week before. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Who can remember this? But retrieval quizzes are really fun, because it's just a way of them remembering quickly. Sometimes I do short little tests with them in the lesson that might take 5 minutes. I might say, okay, we've been doing semicolons. Here's a quick test. Let's see how you do. And then we'll go through it in the lesson. I do find as well that sometimes with some groups, I do keep like a spreadsheet of subject skills descriptors. So for instance, in year 5, with children doing the 11 plus with writing, I will have their names and we'll look at the writing descriptors. And just as I'm looking at their homework, I might tick off different descriptors that I think they're achieving well. It's probably similar to what you did in school. Probably you might not want to go back to that. I found when I left school, I abandoned all of that rubbish, as I called it. I used a harsher word, but I abandoned it all because it just felt like something I was being made to do to show that I was accountable for Ofsted. Now I will do it as and when I feel it's appropriate, because I think actually I need a bit more information and I can't keep it all in my head, kind of thing. I also get the kids to self-evaluate. I think it's really important. You know, how do you feel about narrative writing now? What skills do you think you've accomplished? What skills do you think you still need? How are you going to improve further? So often at the end of a little topic, I will do a self-evaluation. sometimes at the beginning as well. I do set goals with my older students every half term as well. And there are computerized tests available. So people like Atom, I haven't investigated this enough because I do have an account with them, but they provide computerized tests, and I'm sure they will do it for whole classes or groups. Obviously they're online, but they're an amazing way. I think they're mainly, to be honest, for the 11 plus, but I am sure there must be other ones out there for other subjects, or even if you take something like BBC Bite Size, there's quizzes on there. There's no reason why you can't take quizzes that already exist, get your students, you know, if it's a 5-minute test, just to try it and then look at their own results and send that as a screenshot to you of how they've done and where they've done well and where they still need to learn. Do we have any questions on that? As you can see, I told you it's a bit of a whistle stop, but I wanted to give you lots of value to be able to walk away with something. All right, then we will carry on. So people always ask, how can you make groups personalized? And as I've said to you already, you cannot 100% make them personalized unless you literally had an assistant in there for every single child. Or put it this way, the way I do it, I know it can't be 100% personalized 100% of the time. That's the bit I missed. It cannot be 100% personalized 100% of the time. But for instance, my homework feedback is completely personalized because I write a comment, me personally, not someone I've paid to do it. That is not a problem either, of course. You know, I'm not saying you can't get people to mark for you, but every student will get some sort of personalized comment from me every week. They will get personalized questions in the lesson. They, you know, if you're using something, for instance, like Google Classrooms, of course, they'll have their own personal folder where you can put things in. Excuse me a second. Alexa off. I don't know why Alexa suddenly decided to respond to Google Classroom, but there you go. But, you know, you can drop in specific pieces of work if you think it will help your student because they've got stuck on something. You can slip it into their folder. What I've decided to do is, because I think if one student is struggling on something, there might be others. Oh, okay, Claire. I made hers come on. I think, well, everyone's going to want it. I have a free resources section on my website, but I will always tell that student, I've just made this. So somebody at the moment wants something on coordinate conjunctions. So once I've completed it, I will email that student personally and say, I've put it in the free resources area. It's there for you. So, you know, when I get feedback like that, I will respond to it. And this is very important as well. So when I do give feedback, one thing the student can do in the next homework is add more responses to that feedback from the week before. So they can then show me how they are responding to that feedback, or they can even write their own comment. And I very much ask my students, write all over your booklet. If you want to say something to me, if you want to ask me a question that's not covered here, write it down. I will get back to you if we haven't covered it in the lesson. I send WhatsApp messages sometimes, particularly if a student's done really well and I want to congratulate them. So they love it when they get a voice message from me via WhatsApp. On the whole, I do tell my students and my parents via email is the way I want to be communicated with, because I cannot keep track of my WhatsApp messages. There are just too many. But if I want to do something really personal for a child, I will tend to send them a little voice recording. Sometimes we've done little leaderboards. I keep coming back and forward in my mind ethically what I think about leaderboards. So sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. I'm still in a little whiz in my own mind how I feel about that. I think I've covered everything else. Is there anything I haven't covered to do with personalized support? Okay, so my onboarding process is very much, because I'm quite big, the one thing I ask them to do first is check they understand what my groups are about. because as you say, with all those students, I don't onboard though 230 every year. I actually only onboard about 50 at a time, because a lot of them stay with me for a long time. So yeah, I probably onboard about 50. So within that 50, most of them are 11 plus. So with my 11 plus, they receive emails from me. I very much, obviously if people want to talk to me, they can, but because a lot of people know me and have been recommended me through word of mouth, they've heard about me, they know what I'm like, they know how I work, they know my expectations. So I don't actually, lots of people will have meetings, and that's totally the right thing to do. But what I do is I do it slightly differently. So people email me, I let them know whether there's a space or not. Then I talk about the kind of expectations for the 11 plus in an email, and talk about roughly where your child should be. And I talk about the expectations of what we expect in the course. And I say to them, if you're still happy with that, please then, tell me you want to commit. So then they commit. And what I do is what I'm doing at the moment. They pay from a term in advance, and they are given an assessment to do with their child at home. That is not to decide whether they come on board or not. It's just to get a baseline, because I am happy to take any child on within reason if they are willing to learn and willing to do the process, and if their parents are willing to support them. So that's very much made clear before students start. But I think as well, it also takes a good half a term to a term to get to know a child. And it's only after then that I might say, you know what, I think we need to look for something else for your child. But out of every year, it hasn't actually happened this year. Last year, I think one person I had to talk to, and that was it. So obviously at first, when I first started onboarding students, when I took on a lot fewer, I did meet them all individually or have personal phone calls with them. Or for instance, if I get an assessment back from a child this summer and I'm thinking, hang on, that looks a bit dodgy to me, I will ring the parent up. So I do kind of have a way of onboarding them. Some occasionally ask for a free trial, particularly if they're older. What I say is they can sit in on a lesson, but they don't get a free trial before they start. So if they're not sure, they're allowed to sit in on a lesson and see if they think it's for them. So there are ways in which I do kind of onboard that isn't just this strict kind of enrollment. And I also have a meet and greet at the beginning of every year. So in September, I will be having literally a meet and greet for every single year, group that I am running. And I run 14 groups. Oh, Claire asked about disruptive students. So different ways I deal with them. If I am in a lesson with them face to face, I have an assistant. So the assistant will be asked to either sit with the child, or will be asked to, if they are willing to be removed. Of course, we've all got to be really careful with how we do this, and have a chat with them separately. If nothing is working, I will call the parent, or I'll get the assistant to call the parent, and the parent will have to come and take them. And maybe then, so this happened to me once 2 years ago. A child kicked off, and we don't know why, and we still to this day don't know why, but things happen. So and he wouldn't calm down. So we called the parent, who came straight away, and then we kind of followed it up afterwards. And decided it probably wasn't the right, something was going on with him. He needed maybe some different support for that time. If it's online, I will often have a little chat with them privately in chat while I'm teaching. Are you okay? What's going on? I mean, most of the time, disruptive children, there's often, an unmet need or something going on, and you kind of, especially if you've been a teacher, you instinctively know how to deal with it. So I had a child who walked in and sat under a table, and I just ignored him, and the rest of us just carried on. And it was about 10 minutes later, he realized he was looking a bit of an idiot. Nobody was paying attention to him. He came out. It really depends, it's difficult. But I would say, make sure you have parents, phone numbers very, very much to hand in case an emergency happens. But I only have an assistant now in the class. So they don't do any teaching whatsoever, but they are there for safeguarding. They're there for the children. They're there for kind of admin, but they are there if I need them. And in fact, it's part of my agreement with the church. Online, again, going back to online, there was one child who was just fiddling and doing all sorts of things. I gave them a few warnings. I asked them if they were okay. I then just closed the mic down and the screen down and said, unfortunately, at this time, I'm going to have to keep you on mute. Obviously, if they left the room, I would then contact their parent later. At the same time, I did text the parent and say, your child's kicking off. Obviously, I used appropriate language, and I just said, I hope everything's okay. I will contact you later. I've had to mute and turn their video off. But I don't kick them out because I think they might still want access to the lesson and still might get something from it. Are there any other questions? All right then. So I promised you it was a whistle stop. It's literally about, I don't know, 0.5% of everything that's out there in terms of pedagogy and learning and engagement. But I hope you've got something that you can walk away with now. So what I want you to do, I'm going to give you literally a couple of minutes. Have we got a couple of minutes, Sam? Look at what I've put on the board. One thing to change, one thing to start, one thing to stop. Now, you might not have everything. You might not have something for everything, but look at that now and just think, what action can you take now? What one thing you... So I'm going to start again, looking at my interactive whiteboards. One thing I'm going to stop doing is comparing myself to everyone who is much better at tech than me. But have a little think, and if you want to share anything, just type it in chat. But do write something down yourself and date it and come back to this in a month's time. And if your number's changed, if you were 4 and you now feel like you're a 5 or a 6, let me know. Let me know if your number's changed in this lesson. Hopefully it hasn't gone down. I'll just wait. Oh, my goodness. Marvelous. Has written a lot. Ooh. I would like you to maybe email me separately if you need any more on that. But that looks great. I can't read it all. But if you've got a question in that, I would definitely say email me. I'll give you my email in a minute. I haven't got one online, but I do have one that is part of my T's and C's, Fiona, in terms of e-safety. So, oh, look, Claire, cast kick. Yeah. There we are, George. Thanks, George. I'll write my email address now, and then you can always email me at wonderlearn.co.uk. Oh, that should say Charlotte at the front of that. So it should say charlotte.rachel.watson at... No, that's not right. I'm going to give it to you again. Mrs. Watson. I'm mixing up at wonderlearn.co.uk. That's the one. That's the one you need. Yeah, just don't overthink the tech. When the queen of tech told me she uses individual whiteboards and pens in her lessons, I was like, right, no, that's it. I'm done. Okay, thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed your participation and your comments and supporting each other as well.